Okay, I want to say good evening since it's evening here, as you can tell by the window being dark. This is going to be a discussion on religion. And my initial idea was to show that religion includes a lot more than what we commonly ascribe to religion. But I actually made the whole video and then had second thoughts that we have a satisfactory, a workable definition of religion, which wouldn't include the expanses that I'm putting in. So I'm going to kind of rephrase the point of the talk to say that the idea is not to show that everything can be incorporated into religion, but that religion may be incorporated into everything. Slight difference. Why is there religion? First, I'd like you to recall or think about the fact that there was a time when religion pretty much was everything. Weren't separate law books. There wasn't a constitution. There may have been a tribal council or something, but the tribal council had its own ideas about what was right and what was wrong. And essentially, they all stemmed from religion. Religion encompassed everything at one point. It was only as mankind became more sophisticated that we had to peel off science from religion. We had to peel off laws from religion. We had to even move marriage, if not out of religion, at least away from it, so that marriages in most developed countries can now be non-religious, secular ceremonies, etc. So let's go back to original religion. One of the functions of religion is to explain creation. A lot of people who are very religious still accept the religious explanation. However, most people today accept the scientific explanation. However, there's no reason why the scientific explanation couldn't be the one that God used as opposed to the Bible. But the interesting thing is that when you look at Genesis, God starts by separating the light from the dark, and then divides the waters and creates heaven. And he starts out with creating dry land and plants, and then after that, animals. After the sun and the moon came first, and then fish and birds, and then land animals and man. It doesn't quite get it completely right, but it's not bad in terms of the sequence. There is certainly evidence that the heavens and the earth came before mankind, and the earth may have once been completely water covered and the land was separated. And that fish and birds and other animals came before man. So as a first intuitive guess, they did pretty well. Just about every culture has a creation story, and they may vary from religion to religion, but nonetheless, it answers the question of why are we here? And that question applies whether you are religious or not. The ultimate question of creation that's now turned over to science, but for those who follow the science, that is our religion. To question the science is well, the question in an unscientific manner, I should say, is heresy. So, we'll take, for example, evolution specifically. The science prefers the Darwinian or close to a Darwinian explanation. as opposed to a God. But if you believe that God is the God of science, you don't have to throw God out. All right. The second function I want to discuss first is to point out that God is not ruled out by science. You can have the God of science and science as a God, as it is in just about every scientific discipline. They have their own holy Bible. Of course, it's based on proofs and evidence, but nonetheless, they're sacrosanct. It's very much like a religion. And if you go outside it, you are certainly treated like a heretic. Going to the next point. The next thing that religion provides, or another thing may be better because there's no special order, is that you get to belong to a group. The religion defined a group of people. This was certainly true of all of the early religions. I suspect Judaism for sure, probably Hinduism. Christianity kind of spread across other defined groups, but nonetheless, Christians still identified with one another as Christians, and certain rules of behavior were observed, and some wars, such as the Crusades, were fought by Christians from various nations against non-Christians. So belonging to that group, belonging to any tribal group, has aspects of religion to it. Yeah, it's just that times have changed, but I think the underlying chemistry and what's going on in our brains is the same as it was in primitive times, and that our group belonging is a religious function. You associate with people, you give, you direct some alms, some charity toward, you may give charity to many other groups, but you have some preference of giving to your own group. You support that group's causes for the most part, and it's very much like a religion. Take a contemporary example. Black Lives Matter is not considered a religion, but if you look at the way it's observed and practiced, you can make a darn good argument that it is very much like a religion. And certainly those who step out of line are treated like heretics. So the tendency to form groups for mutual benefit, whether it's Hell's Angels or a group of university professors, the underlying desire to associate with your, quote, tribal element or group, I think is, in my book, it's related to religion in any case. It's one of the functions. And the other point that I would make is that the bond in the group is transcendent, sort of like religious. You look at the binding, Marines, for example, and the Corps. I would call that a religious feeling that they have. Doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, Hell's Angels, Salvation Army. You give it, look at any group, and I think there's a transcendent bond which is fundamentally religious. So you can see my attitude towards religion is a bit oddball and offbeat. And you don't have to accept that as a definition of religion, but I hope you can at least see how there is a religious element to so much of our life that don't recognize as being religious. In other words, we're governed by subconscious, primitive forces that control not only our behavior, but help regulate our opinions, our affiliations, etc. All right, going back again, originally, early mankind, there were no rules and no laws. It was kind of like the eat or be eaten situation. Primitive hunters would go out and kill animals to eat, and they would gather food. And if another group interfered with what they were doing, they might have lethal warfare. Excuse me. But at some point, people began to cooperate in larger groups. I think as long as it was a family, there may have been sort of, again, my kind of unconscious religion. But as soon as we had a civilization, there was a need for rules, laws, and regulations. And in early mankind, you didn't have a lawyer and a judge and a court and a police force. So you had to come up with rules to live by. And the rules that you live by essentially were your religion. If you look at, Judaism is certainly an excellent example of that. If you go through the Talmud, which is the major expounding of all the rules governing what Judaism was, around the time before and after the Christian era, but around that time, the Talmud, I think it was first Babylonian Talmud, I think was published officially 600 BCE. I'd have to look that up to be sure, so don't hold me on that. But the point is that back at that time, the rules and the laws were derived from religion. And it's only in relatively recent times that we've become sophisticated enough, and in part because there were the diversity of religions, that we had to take that law and rulemaking away from, quote, religion and put it under, quote, secular law. But even secular law is at its root has a religious base. Something is right because it is right. The things in the Ten Commandments, for example, they follow. Stealing is against the law. Murder is against the law. Coveting thy neighbor's wife is against the law in some countries. In the U.S., not so, but it can still get you into major trouble. And there's a general feeling that it is wrong, and that feeling that it's wrong is a religious feeling. So we start with the fact that there are originally no rules or laws. A powerful chief or leader would come along and establish rules and laws. However, if he stepped too far out of line, the people held them accountable, with either assassination, rebellion, overthrowing, whatever. And where's the authority to do that? The authority comes again from this inherent conviction of right versus wrong, which I'll say is basically a religious thing. So, even though recent history we've separated calling it God or calling it religion, it functions in very much the same way. And if you ever listen to an argument between a liberal and a conservative, you can't really tell it very much from a religious argument, because they hold basic premises as to the nature of the universe and how it should be, which are articles of faith ultimately. I won't deny that there isn't logic built in on both sides, but if you go back, push that logic hard enough, you'll find that they're supported by some element of faith. So, we'll summarize. I had to write it down so I'd remember correctly. The way I wrote it was essentially our uncompromising beliefs are fundamentally religious, unless they derive from mathematical proofs. And even math requires a faith in the math to accept the proof. Not too many of our laws have mathematical proofs. They have some statistical justifications, but they are far from mathematical proofs of our laws. So it's sort of like what they called. There's a name for where you see God in everything, and I don't see God. Well, actually, in a way, I do. In a way, I do. But I certainly see religion in everything. I think it's part and parcel of our very being, and it governs how we think and what we say and what our opinions are, more than people will admit, because they separate the quote secular from the religious. But at its heart, the strong opinions held are really religious ones. Politics based primarily on faith. Give you an example here. We take the healthcare issue. If you believe that healthcare should be nationalized, you believe that that action will produce the most good. If you're opposed to that, you believe that individual action free from government will bring the most good. So both sides take the evidence that proves them right, and they largely ignore any contradictions that come up. So they're very much like religious convictions. As a conclusion, I'll say you don't have to accept this broader definition of religion. In fact, I don't expect anybody but me to accept that. However, it will help you understand the total intractability of many debates. And if you understand the other person's quote religion, okay, then at that point you'll understand their arguments better. And we argue on the basis of assumptions, which when you go back are often very hard to prove. Assumptions that are hard to prove. If you go back far enough, you have to start with assumptions. That's sort of the point. Things that you hold to be self-evident. Just take that line from, I believe, the Declaration of Independence. We hold that these truths are self-evident. Okay, life, liberty. And the third one down that I'm blocking on at the moment. Pursuit of happiness, I think. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Okay, that we are all entitled to those three things. And the government may guarantee it, may put it in writing, but it still starts out as an assumption of faith. All right, God bless everybody. Whether you believe in God or not, you can use the blessing. And have a good night.